We continue the marvel of Lauda in 1977.
Niki won the 1977 championship for Ferrari. He secured the championship at the American Grand Prix at Watkins Glen,
Earning not just the World Drivers title, but also the title for the most wins of a Ferrari driver. And the best part is he did all of this with a Ferrari that was not the fastest car on the grid. 1977, they slipped back a little.
and for the last two races of the season, Niki said, Enzo, you should be able to find yourself another driver. And he left to Brabham, owned by the infamous Bernie Eccleston.
And the GOAT himself, Gordon Murray.
And hello. First race in Argentina, Niki Lauda passes Carlos Rott, going into second place. This one move screamed louder than 1,000 V12 engines.
And this was only the start of Ferrari's biggest nightmare.
What Ferrari didn't know is that Niki brings success wherever he goes. You send Niki out, you send success out. And in Ferrari's case, it's also you send sanity out. As soon as Ferrari would see it play out in front of their own eyes, like falling in love with the girl you dumped who just became the top model for someone else, well, that would take a bit of time. Niki didn't immediately stack up 4 championships with Brabham, but Niki was ahead of the Ferraris, finishing second for the first race. In Brazil, Niki finished third. He finished second in Monaco. Niki won Sweden and Italy, Ferrari's home course. Lol. He got a few more podiums, but he wasn't going to win the championship. Yet still, Ferrari couldn't ignore it. They made a big mistake. But for Niki, 1979 was just worse. Niki only won 4 points. And then in the middle of Canada practice, Niki dropped a bombshell on Formula 1. Niki just walked out and retired. What, from practice? No! Retired from Formula 1.
Niki showed once again he is no one's dog.
Niki said it's stupid to drive around in circles. After he already proved his point and showed Ferrari who's boss in 1978, well, he just wasn't motivated enough to bring Brabham back up. So from that time, Niki was retired. Maybe he just needed the break, some peace and quiet, for more than a year. And for the late 70s and creeping into the 80s, we saw a rise of new talent in the form of Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost,
Jules Villeneuve,
Riccardo Patrese, Jacques Lafitte, and Nigel Mansell. Truly one of my favorites of all time. Turned out to be one of the most charismatic drivers I know. And one more came who would revolutionize the game, showing the truth about Formula 1. In the time that Lauda wouldn't be racing, he showed his legend and genius in another way. He made a flight company called Lauda Air. But in these 80s, the air business was proving expensive, and Niki was missing his best friend, his race car. Deep inside, he wanted to race again, and now he had the credit to almost walk into any good car, because his history gave the picture of near pre-guaranteed success. After careful planning, he chose McLaren, and McLaren wasn't nearly the fastest. James Hunt's old team, McLaren, in 1981 finished 6th in the championship. But what everyone didn't know is that they were gonna leave a hole in Formula 1 through the rest of the 80s. Niki Lauda came back. He said it was to get enough money for Lauda Air, but we know why he's back in the racing. Ron Dennis at McLaren was deeply interested in bringing Niki back into Formula 1. A secret test was arranged at Donington Park in 1981 with the McLaren MP41. This was a groundbreaking car with a carbon fiber chassis designed by John Barnard. Niki quickly proved he hadn't lost his touch. Niki hadn't driven a Formula 1 car for 2 years, but at testing, he lapped faster than John Watson, McLaren's current driver. This test proved more than just the fact that Niki was worth signing. And as we shall see, as usual, not just on track, also off track, Niki was more than part of fine-tuning that McLaren. Niki played the key role in signing a revolutionary partnership between McLaren and Tag Porsche that would change the game. The deal was for an engine made by Porsche. F1 engines were getting turbocharged. They were getting overpowered. McLaren's Ford engine wasn't cutting it. They needed a new engine. So Porsche made them a 1.5-liter twin-turbo 80-degree angle V6 engine that could produce over 800 horsepower. For the early days, they kept it around 650. But something was going down. This was no play. With Niki Lauda, McLaren and Porsche, they would make a mark in Formula 1 racing. a hole through time that would never be erased nor be filled. But there was also something else going on. There was a new guy in the team, a man who Niki didn't know would be his biggest problem for the 80s, Ayrton Prost. Ayrton debuted for McLaren in 1980. He raced for Renault from 1981 to 1983. He had already been successful, showing great potential.
He was young, rising championship material.
He had won 9 F1 Grand Prix, and in 1983, he narrowly lost the championship by only 2 points. But Niki saw something that no one else did. The reality behind why Ayrton later was nicknamed the Professor. And Niki knew he had one hell of a year in front of him. And he was pumped. This year was going to be competitive. This time, the championship starts in Brazil. And for this first Grand Prix, Niki Lauda starts 6th place, while Ayrton took 4th. Elio De Angelis took pole. The race starts, the battle is on. Nigel Mansell bullets away with an amazing launch, taking 3rd place. Alboreto leads the race. Piquet failed to start at first before restarting it. Made his mission rather to catch up than to lead the race. Niki Lauda made his way up the field, got in Nigel Mansell's slipstream, eventually getting in front, pushing Nigel Mansell wide for the best entry into the corner, taking 3rd place. Alan was also charging up the field. Alboreto spun out. Niki Lauda was in P1. Alan passed Nigel, and Nelson Piquet, charging up the field, managed to make up a lot of time and pass many drivers, including his own teammates. But Lauda was dominating the race with his tag McLaren. He was pushing with a point to prove. He absolutely pushed it to the limit, displaying a perfect image of matured speed. Niki Lauda lapped Rosberg. Then Nigel Mansell crashed, but he was okay. Alan pitted, but Niki was going a little slowly. He came into the pits, and then it turned out that he had electrical problems. So he retired. Alan Prost won the first race in Brazil. Next race was in South Africa. Alan Prost started in the pit lane with a spare car. The race starts and Nigel Mansell pulled off a 500 IQ move, leaving his car a distance from his own grid, performing a rolling start before taking off. This gave him the best launch. Piquet has a bad start again, but he recovered into 2nd. Rosberg was leading. Niki Lauda was in 4th. Alan had a job to do, just like Nelson in the previous race. But then look, Nelson Piquet just took the lead. Rosberg was now in 3rd place. Niki was putting heavy pressure on him until getting him on an exit, then passing him on the main straight. Then Niki took Fabi, and then it was Niki and Nelson. 2 world champions, one a golden legend, one a young raw talent. Niki was gaining. He was showing amazing driving. He was about to breathe down Nelson's back. But then Piquet waved Lauda past because he needed to go to the pits. But while this was all happening, Alan Prost had moved up to 7th. He was delivering and he was gaining a lot of trust in his McLaren. McLaren was also seeing that he was the right sign. Nelson moved back up to 2nd place. Niki still in the lead. Prost pitted, but it was a slow stop. Then Niki pitted. And when he exited the pits, he had a clear track in front of him. And behind him. Oh, you think it was a little clear patch in midfield? Niki was in the lead. Thanks to Lauda and McLaren's strategy, absolute genius. Passing a first-year second race rookie Ayrton Senna, who moved up to 6th place, scoring points in a tournament. In the end, Niki won, finishing P1. But the other thing to take note of, Alain Prost went from the pit lane to the podium. 2nd place finish with a gap to Niki of 65 seconds. McLaren absolutely dominated. This podium was looking scary. But so was Niki. It wasn't just the McLaren Porsche. Niki's legend was not gone. The way he came back this time, it was different from the last, least to say. The Belgian Grand Prix, McLaren retired. Alain retired due to electrics. Niki retired due to water pump failure. Piquet's engine blew. Oh, come on. But then hello, you see a new race, a new track, a new Grand Prix located in Italy. And I'm not sure if any of the drivers knew that this was going to be one of the greatest tracks of all time. It was Imola, where Niki retired due to ignition failure. McLaren still had a lot to work on. Their car was fast, but there were so many rough edges, so many things. They needed to get a lot in order and make their car reliable. Although Alain Prost actually won the race, without a doubt McLaren was still to be the dominator. Just shave a few rough edges, fix a few little things, and then you will see the monster, driven by a monster. As soon as Niki did get a chance to actually finish a race, well, he won the French Grand Prix. And then came Monaco. Definitely one of Niki's favorite tracks in memory of 9
1973, but Niki had a hard time qualifying. He started in 8th. But it'd be the good time now for me to mention something interesting. Niki in 1985 said that he had trouble setting up the McLaren for 1984. The trouble was to set it in best condition for race and qualifying. He said he had a lack of experience in McLaren. He couldn't get the car perfect for qualifying and racing. So what did he do? He chose the race to fight. And that new rookie, Ayrton Senna, he was starting 13th. No, you actually need to keep that in mind. The Grand Prix starts and Alain makes an amazing launch off the line, getting ahead of Nigel Mansell. And before the tunnel, Niki made up 5 places. Prost lifted the pace enough to pull a gap between him and Mansell, but Alain, Nigel, Alboreto, and Niki, they were managing a pace and being careful, planning a strategy of when to push when it gets dry. Although Alain Prost did have an advantage over Nigel Mansell in 2nd place, not just due to the very few parts where the corners are fast enough for the aero to work in these rainy conditions at Monaco, for Nigel Mansell to get a negative toe from Alain in those corners, but also there was a lot of spray coming from Alain's car as expected in the rain. So Alain had much better visibility than Nigel Mansell. So what Nigel was doing is staying a good distance from Alain until overtaking him, moving up to P1 until he crashed. Niki Lauda was also moving up the field, making one of his moves at the slowest hairpin, steering full lock. Look how close he went to that barrier. Then accelerating toward the right-hander to the downhill, he makes the move stick. But somewhere else far behind in the pack, there was a possessed Firebird who uninvitedly decided to burn the script. Rain that would usually be the great leveler, leaving it all up to driver skill and not about car performance. While in this race, yes, the Firebird did burn the script. He was flying up the field, doing it as if it's dry, yet the water was literally flowing down the track, completely comfortable in the rain. This Firebird was Ayrton Senna, while Jonathan Palmer, Derek, many other drivers getting tripped by the rain. Alain Prost and Niki Lauda having a safety margin. Ayrton Senna, on the other hand, was finding grip in ways that other drivers were not able to. Starting in 13th, well, guess where he is now? Right behind Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda in this time was working like a forensic surgeon, finding his way up the field. He landed P2 and he needed to catch Alain, but he didn't anticipate the speeding Ayrton Senna charging with fire right behind him. Niki tried to defend for a while as Ayrton was practically on top of him, but then he was gone. Before Niki knew it, Senna was beside him and then he was in front taking the first corner. Senna passing Niki also felt his aura, so they went together to chase Prost, but Niki knew he saw something surreal. He got caught in a flash by the Firebird. It's not something usual. So Niki trying to stay with Senna to catch Prost while there was no option but to push. He had to stay in Senna's pace and then he spun out. He couldn't do it. He didn't manage to keep the engine running, so he couldn't rejoin. The front wing was damaged. He was out of the Monaco Grand Prix. Ayrton closed the gap until he was sniffing Alain's bumper and he was ready to burn him down to 2nd place, winning the Monaco Grand Prix. Ayrton was operating on another level. He was catching Prost 2.5 seconds per lap. Previous drivers, he was catching 4 seconds per lap. But then Alain, seeing that he's being chased so rapidly by Ayrton, well, he told the stewards to stop the race, waving his hands. And Balestri, the boss, made the call when Ayrton was getting too close to Alain. The red flags came out, the race stopped. Alain stopped just before the finish line. Ayrton was the first to cross the finish line, and then they called the race on the previous lap, so Alain wins. And lucky for Alain, they were in the habit of calling the win on the previous lap when they ended the race prematurely. I'm talking about 31 of 77 laps prematurely. After the race, Niki needed to see something special for himself. It flashed past him too fast, so he couldn't see it properly. It was the Firebird, and he was greatly moved to encourage a new talent in him. But Niki also realized Alain Prost, and for the rest of the season, Niki knew the plot. He knew what he needed to do to win once again, and he became a relentless monster. By this point, Alain Prost was leading the Drivers' World Championship. After this amazing weekend at Monaco was the Canadian Grand Prix. Nelson Piquet took pole again, but when the race started, Alain stole it away. Niki started far back in 8th place, then Nelson took the lead again and pulled away to keep 1st place until the end. Niki managed to work his way up the field until coming to finish 2 seconds behind Nelson Piquet. Alain Prost took 3rd, over 30 seconds behind. Detroit gave one of the weirdest races with only 5 drivers drivers finishing, and Niki wasn't one of them. In Dallas, Niki also retired. If Niki wanted to win the Drivers' World Championship, he would need to pull out something now. We come to the British Grand Prix, and Niki is starting in 3rd place, PK on pole again, Alain on 2nd. The race starts. Elio De Angelis takes 3rd away from Niki, but it lasts for 5 minutes. Niki takes it back and starts breathing down Alain's neck until Alain overtakes Nelson Piquet. Niki picks up the pieces, overtaking Nelson straight after his momentum drops, but then a crash brought out the red flag, and the race started all over again. And this second start was starting with the grid from qualifying. They were restarting the whole race. Basically, Nelson was given a second chance to hold his position, and it didn't work. Alain got the best launch and shot in front of Nelson into 1st place. Niki gets into 2nd. Alain gets problems. Niki goes into 1st and wins the race. Ayrton Senna comes 3rd in his Tallman. A podium again. Wow, how is he doing this in a Tallman? Alain wins in Germany and Niki comes 2nd. Ayrton's wing came off, sending him into the barriers full force. And he was extremely happy about it. I mean, look how he got out of the cockpit, stood on the grass, and then showed how much he loves that steering wheel of his. Barriers. Then came Austria. Niki's home race that he never won. He had the home Grand Prix curse. But going into this one, he was determined he'll do what he needs to do to win. Also the fact that the championship was riding on it. Nelson Piquet was relentless in qualifying for the whole year, getting pole again. After some track confusion due to trouble at the start lights, bringing another restart. Finally, the Austrian Grand Prix was underway. This time on the restart, PK buggered his launch, yet he still managed to keep the lead. Niki got a bad one, dropping down to 6th place. Mansell in 7th, Senna in 8th. Senna passes Mansell, but then Lauda took Elio De Angelis and Derek. Now Lauda was closing in on Patrick Tambay, getting deep within a second of him, until sniffing his bumper. He was observing Patrick's driving, and Lauda, seeing that he can easily outbrake Tambay without scrubbing his speed off, costing him an exit. He found Tambay's weakness, and he showed absolutely no forgiveness. So he went for the move, the classic Lauda move. He rather broke equal with Patrick and took a tight inside line. Managed to cleanly rotate his car quicker, and before Patrick he was on the throttle. He opened his car through the rest of the corner, and on the exit he could easily take Tambay. He somehow managed to find grip where Tambay couldn't, carrying more speed related to the rotational angle he was carrying through early mid-corner. By exit he cleared 0.2 of a second. By the end of that lap, Lauda was over 2 seconds ahead of Tambay. This is what you call maximizing the potential of the car. Then Niki went on the hunt to catch Alain Prost. Niki clearly again showed in this moment that he knows how to extract the advantages of his McLaren at the right time. When he needed to dive, he dived. Coming toward a corner that demands a fast exit in order to close the gap, while Niki would do what he needs to do in rotation to set the car up perfectly, angle his trajectory to open it up and exit at top speed without compromising his mid-corner speed. He didn't scrub his speed off, he didn't scrub his tires, and he was patient. He didn't overstress anything, he didn't do more than he needed to. This is how he could close over 2 milliseconds on Tambay so quickly. He did it perfect. Nothing less and nothing more. You're going up against Niki Lauda in a race. You hear that his style is slowing and fast out, so you think you can dive him. You attempt it, and you see that you can't keep up with his pace. Somehow it's like he smoothly teleports forward without you even noticing. And it's usually when you are the one that makes the slightest mistake. You'll see him 7/10 more ahead of you, and the gap growing. Which brings me to the elephant in the room. There's only one name I can give Niki. That is the Last Ghost. Niki took the title at Marty's 76 Dilemma and used it for the defiance and speed he revealed on track. Just like we saw the Ghost come back that time, he was back again. These were only a few of the best laps of his life. And so, Niki started closing on Alain. From 5 seconds that was between them, Niki closed it up to within a second and immediately started putting pressure on Alain. There was some oil in the track, Lotus, that blew up, and while Niki was pushing Alain went over the oil and spun. He DNF'd. Then it was Nelson Piquet.
For this race, Niki showed consistently outstanding pace and control. By the time he got to Nelson, he understood the power of the BMW engine of Nelson's car, made the best run to keep up with him on the straight. He got close in the slipstream and got close to making a move. They went through the chicane and then exiting, he made the move on the downhill, taking PK, taking P1 to win the race. And after that, we saw the truth about Niki Lauda, because by the end of the race, the gap between him and PK was 23.525 seconds. You know, he made that lead up when he actually lost fourth gear. He had to go around fourth using only third and fifth. Then came the Dutch Grand Prix that Nelson led for the start. Niki in ninth was moving up the grid. But then Nelson's car decided it wasn't interested in working anymore. Niki took second place. Lol. You don't think Niki enjoyed moving up the grid starting from ninth? Like how Senna got complacent and proud rather playing with opponents instead of growing a gap? Actually no, not at all. Niki didn't put himself at the back of the grid just for the hell of it. He set his car up for racing because he knew he could deliver there. Trust me, he didn't want to start in ninth. But when he did, look, he delivered. Although in the end, Alain won the Dutch Grand Prix. Niki came second, Nigel came third. Now there were only 3 races left for the championship. The leader was Alain. The Formula 1 weekend was now in Italy. Nelson took pole once again. Consistent, blistering pace. Alain took second. Niki was starting on fourth. They launch away. Ilio takes the lead until Nelson grabs it back. Niki made a terrible start, going down to P8. Nelson owns a big lead. Alain overtook Ilio into second place, and Niki started making up the positions he lost at the start. He went up to 6th place, but if Niki wanted to win, he needed to win races. Leading order was Nelson PK, who was pushing from the start to grow a big lead, build the cushion behind him. Second place in the Lotus was De Angelis, then was Alain Prost. And Nelson was successful. He was showing blistering pace. Then Alain Prost pulled out of slipstream to take second place on the straight, and he did it, P2, while Niki Lauda moved up to 6th place. However, Nelson was relentless, and it looked like the strategy was gonna pay off in this race. The BMW engine was extremely powerful, perfect for the Monza circuit. Patrick Tambay was now closing in on Alain Prost, and they were both trying to get to PK. And then PK made a dreadful mistake going on the grass almost off the circuit, but he controlled it well enough. But it did take away his momentum, and it was on an exit before a long straight, so it definitely costed him. But he had a good enough cushion that it didn't cost him place. There was still a good enough gap. The front leading trio started getting tight together. Then it was the second trio, then the rest of the pack. Niki found an efficient place on the straight to pass the Lotus in front of him without using up his tires for a lunge or something. But he just didn't have enough power when he left his toe, and the Lotus outbroke him, and he wasn't interested in a braking battle into the corner. But then once he set it up properly, he overtook him on the straight. But Niki didn't join the front pack, he rather maintained a cruising pace. This is where things got interesting. Niki wasn't pushing. The front pack was sprinting away, going down the main straight, and then Alain Prost's engine blew. Lucky for Nelson, the engine blow of Alain's McLaren was enough to shock Tambay, giving Nelson the chance to run away. And it gave Niki a free position after he already overtook the Lotus. Niki was in 4th place now. Fabi, seeing that Tambay's pace dropped, immediately went for the kill. He was on his bumper, and this only gave Nelson the chance to pull away more. Where was Lauda? 3 seconds behind them, and that gap only grew to 4 seconds. Niki was not pushing. He was consistently sitting in a cruising pace. The leading trio started spreading out a little. PK was absolutely pushing. And Tambay, on the other hand, was switching between trying to attack PK, gain ground on him, getting mad in his draft in the corners, and trying to defend Fabi. But their overall pace was a leading pace. One of the Ferraris retired, and at this time Fabi was on the attack for 2nd place. And the gap between Fabi and Niki in 4th place, well, it had grown. It was now over 5 seconds. Nelson was broadening his lead. Teo Fabi was desperate on the attack, and it looked like he got a better exit out of the corner. They're on the straight. He's in Tambay's draft, taking the chicane, and he spins. Niki Lauda grabbed the 3rd place on the podium. Leading was now just PK and Tambay, and they started pulling away. Really fast. On the push, it looked like PK and Tambay were working together to push away from the pack. They pushed to the point to make the gap between Tambay and Lauda over 7 seconds. Then it went over 9 seconds, bordering on 10. Niki was just cruising, and he wasn't bothered. He stayed composed. He wasn't pushing yet. When Niki does this, it's always scary. When is he going to start pushing? What is going to happen when he starts his spurt? The leading duo was getting closer to each other. Nelson's pace was dropping a bit. Then the gap between Tombe and Lauda went down to 8 seconds. Then Nigel Mansell went into the gravel. And then it happened. A whole lot of smoke came out of the back of Nelson Piquet's car. He slowed down, but Tombe didn't pass him. There was just enough room, although there was a problem. Could have been an oil leak. It didn't look like the engine was blown. He was still leading the race. But then he did slow down, and he was overtaken by Tombe. And now Piquet was vulnerable to Niki. The general gap was shrunk a little, and in this time, Fabi, who had spun earlier, he just overtook Niki Lauda, and Niki Lauda led him through. The race went on with Tombe storming away from the pack. At this point, there were about 6 seconds between him and Fabi, who was just in front of Niki. And this is when they picked up the pace to try catch Tombe. Niki was on Fabi's tail. Then they gained a bit of distance from each other, and after a couple laps, also with some traffic assistance, they closed the gap, and Fabi began to get a little hot under the collar. He got nervous and he started making moves, trying to speed up, trying to lunge, trying to get closer to Tombe, and in the process he misjudged. He made a bad lunge that totally killed his momentum and almost sent him into Niki, and so Niki was a little irritated, and he tried to take this moment to overtake Fabi on the straight, but it wasn't successful. He had the exit, but he just didn't have the speed in mid-straight. But it was only going to be a matter of time. Niki went up to second place, and immediately he brought in the gap between him and Fabi. Over 3 seconds, Niki was catching Tombe, but he still maintained a healthy distance from him. Many laps went by. Tombe knew Niki was there, but Niki wasn't close enough to make Tombe defend. They were both pushing hard, but the fact is, Niki's tires were much better, and so was his mental state. Niki Lauda got the fastest lap. They're heading towards the chicane. Niki on Patrick's tail once again takes a magical line, and on exit, there's ghost lag. Niki shot forward somehow. Tombe doesn't get a chance to anticipate the ghost flying past him, finding the grip to exit, cutting down half a second in half a second. Niki took P1. That exit, what happened? It was done. It was over. It was finished. You see, Alain won the following European and Portuguese Grand Prix, but it was already over in Italy. There's something you might have probably missed. It was most clear to Niki in Monaco. Niki saw Alain's blistering pace and his amazing racecraft on and off track, but he also saw the chink in his armor. He knew what he needed to do on counter. That would be what Alain didn't realize. Niki Lauda's consistency. He used it, and in the end it paid off, because at the end of the year they judged the champion from the 11 best results of a driver to judge the consistency and give forgiveness for mechanical problems which are not the driver's fault. This rule showed what Niki had that Alain didn't. Niki saw the weak link, and he gave absolutely no forgiveness. So even though on points Alain won against Niki, Niki had better points after the final judgment, giving him the Formula 1 World Drivers' Championship of 1984 by only half a point. But it was enough. The last ghost was back, and he made McLaren a fortress of dominance that would continue something revolutionary through the years. Niki and Alain with McLaren won the Constructors' Championship, beating Niki's old team, Ferrari, by 86 points. Someone go buy Enzo on 86. Niki broke the system. Broke Enzo. The last ghost. Took fate by the balls and told it to. But there was something chasing Niki. Something he didn't see coming, because he defied it in the past already. It was the reason 1984 would be the last championship he wins, and it was also the reason that he lost 1976. The ghost he stared at dancing between life and death, well, he used that same image in speed to win 2 more World Drivers titles. He defied fate, handed death his ass, but he couldn't do it forever, because that ghost, the ghost of fate, Grim Reaper, was slowly but surely catching him. It had the same intelligence level as Niki, tripping him when it matters. After 1985, Niki retired as Alain won the championship. Niki still works in Formula 1 very closely. He watched the legend of Senna rise up, and if you want to know more about Senna, I made a full 2-hour film on him too. In the 2000s, he was part of the rise of Mercedes, and he convinced Lewis Hamilton to join, and look where that brought him. Niki Lauda was definitely a revolution to Formula 1. But in 2019, that Grim Reaper would catch him for the worst. He died. Yet still, I bet if you got the chance to ask Niki, he would tell you, I have no regrets. This is what made Niki one of the greatest men in Formula 1 racing.
Inhaled through gauze of bone dust air, who came in, who didn't know his presence would make a monster, scar unproved. The Reaper, one single gap left, big enough for a rat. Played along, didn't take the time. When he felt it, he recognized it. Same whose image was made heroic, leaner, quiet, unhooked its cape and dropped its weapons. No flames, no trials, no breeze, just silence. Watched it fall before his eyes. You held me once, but only time told how trade for trade I use your image. And he who outbroke fate was reaped. Legends might die, but they still live in the hearts of the ones they leave behind.
pursuit of fate, you'll defy, reborn, reshaped, stormy ballet. Until that final run, that's on edges, just begun. Triumph 5, wisdom 1, shining spirit alive. Fragile carbon, take the blight. Scarlet screams for all our might. Risk it all to claim the light. That shining dream for gaining right. This inner fire turns the page. The last ghost has come again. The will to strive beyond the rage. From doubt, escape the cage.
So I tell you from my own experience, winning is one thing, but out of losing, I always learned more for the future. So I got stronger in losing.